Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Simplify Solutions webinar on SAP's solution BPC Optimized for S4. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is John Collins, Director of Sales with Simplify Solutions, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. If you're not familiar, BPC Optimized is an advanced BPC solution providing financial reporting, planning, and consolidations all in one HANA-supported platform. Our organizer for today's session is John Essig. John is a partner at Simplify, as well as our senior architect. He's well known within the SAP community. And he's served as over the past 10 years, has served as an administrator, consultant, and architect. In addition, his passion for new technology makes him ideally suited to lead us in today's conversation. Our agenda for today is we'll start out by telling you who we are at Simplify. Then John will take over and provide an overview of BPC Optimized. It's talking about some of the standard functionality as well as some of the advanced new concepts. So some of you may be familiar with Simplify. For those who are not, we're an SAP implementation partner and specialize in implementing, enhancing, and upgrading and supporting SAP's EPM and BI solutions, including BPC Standard, BPC Embedded, and certainly BPC Optimized for S4. So with that, I'll hand it over to John Essig and let him talk about BPC Optimized for S4.
Okay, great, John. I switched to my slide deck. I couldn't see a couple of the slides promoting here. So again, I'll just give my background here very fast. Worked in corporate finance, accounting, have my CPA. Very similar background for most of our consultants. So I actually, before getting on the consulting side, worked on Outlooksoft 4.2, which became BPC, for a company out of the west suburbs in Chicago here, administering and running the financial planning process and consolidations. Been in consulting since then. I've implemented many planning, consolidation, analytic systems over the years. So today's agenda, first of all, we've kind of bifurcated this agenda into two pieces, targeted towards two somewhat different user bases. The first one that we'll cover off is really focusing on part of the end state for your BPC Optimized S4 implementation. So to give you a feel for some of the real-time management reporting capabilities that you can get out of the system, the integration with your board books, quarterly board book publish, statements that can actually be, integrated fully with PowerPoint, as well as some example departmental expense planning capabilities and commentary. Then we'll get into, for some of the heavier users out there, for IT folks, for super users that are looking to evaluate BPC Optimized for S4, some of the real-time modeling capabilities within the system, security configuration, give you an idea of actually how you build this infrastructure, as well as best practice report deployment within analysis for Office. So with that being said, we'll kind of jump straight into the demo here. So for those of you that have utilized BPC in the past, let me make sure I shrink my screen. The BPC Optimized homepage is very, very similar. So you actually have here on the left-hand side, you have tabs for your library, so different reports that you would save out to the web. So these could be reports for entering in, exchange rates. These could be different analytical reports. You have activities that are assigned to you as a user. So, for example, myself, I have a data analysis process flow assigned to me. Very similarly, you can assign process flows to guide users through their planning process to track status of where people are at in their planning process, as well as with the consolidations. So this shows up with any activities. You may have an activity for planning, for consolidations. You may have a separate activity for expense planning versus revenue planning with just those very specific tasks assigned to those users. This process monitor is then where you can go and you can actually see where people are at in those individual steps. So this could be by cost center, this could be by region, whatever level of detail you're delegating these steps down to. Consolidation contains some of the consolidation capabilities we won't be covering this off in detail in this presentation, but ownership, journals, a lot of that functionality that you need for a full, robust consolidation solution. Last couple tabs on here really only available if you're an administrator within the system. So you have centralized modeling that you can do through this nice HTML5-like web interface. So as opposed to going into SAP GUI, right? You do this right from this nice interface that's a little bit easier to use. And then lastly, system reports. So here within the administration tab, you can do the modeling, update master data, so you can actually add planning master data here if you want to add new products, new cost centers on the fly. And this is integrated back with your centralized master data and SAP. Security, you can configure business process flows very easily. You just actually link to a task or an object. That doesn't need to be done by a technical person. Again, all the tasks within this administration can be finance or super user owned or IT owned, just depending on the deployment strategy within your organization. And then again, lastly, system reports. So this provides some audit functionality to look at activity within the system, administrative activity, data changes, etc. So I'm going to go ahead, that's just a quick overview of the web launch page. However, within BPC Optimized for S4, just like within BPC Standard, the main interface for you is really Excel. So this web interface under my activities, if I click on my data analysis task, provides me links to all the pertinent activities to me as a user. So for example, again, if you had revenue planning, you might have a step that links you, and if you're a manufacturing company, to load your volume data, to load your pricing information, to calculate that on the fly in the system. This process flow was really set up just to kind of cater to this demo, and the steps that we'll go through in the demo is just an example of that. So I have a task here for data modeling, which we'll get to in the second half of the webinar. Again, we're going to focus a little bit more on the end state here. Have a step for ad hoc reporting, and we can simply just bundle together all of our different reports into a reporting package here so that it's very easy to access. So you're not fishing around for that in in a computer folder, right? So all these reports are centrally held and controlled by an administrator. You can also set up teams within the system so that you can have some decentralized reporting for specific groups that they can control as well. So we have some analysis, ad hoc reporting, and then finally some published, finished, polished reports. So we're going to start off by going into some ad hoc reporting. We're going to click on the profitability link here, and this is going to actually open up for us, again, an Excel-based report within Analysis for Office, which is an Excel plugin. So again, with Excel, BPC Optimized, BPC being targeted with the end user base being finance, Excel, again, is that main interface. So what this does is it opens up a simple ad hoc reporting template that's been pre-configured for us. So once we set up the models in BPC, set up the queries, you can provide, standard set of 2, 3, 4, sets of ad hoc reporting that are already formatted for your end users. And then again, I'll show you some of the finished polished reporting later. So for example, I come into this report, I'm looking at actuals versus forecast by account. And then I have a filter on the top of the report for fiscal year period. But this is highly customizable. So you might also have a filter on the top of your report for entity. But if I click on the filter, I can change the selection here to a specific month. So if I wanted to pick, March and hit the checkbox, hit OK, all my numbers refresh and update automatically. For this, I'm actually just going to select all my months so that I can see a year-to-date view through April of 2016. Within this report, this is drillable, so I can click and I can drill down under net income. I can also, if I want to add a variance column, for example, between actual and forecast, do that pretty easily by right-clicking and selecting new lines. So very fast here, I can create a quick ad hoc report. So if I'm tasked with explaining a management variance at month end, this is simple and easy to do and navigate within Excel, and is actually, again, can be highly formatted, so you can actually print this out and hand it to your manager or email it off to your manager. So right there, I just added a fast variance. This is dynamic, so as we continue to drill into this report, that variance sticks. Another neat functionality, I can have kind of all these hot links up on the top, which are connected to my taskbar here. So if I want to actually modify the configuration of this report, I can select my design panel, and if I want to take this variance and then drag company code into the columns, for example, I can drag company code to the columns, and the variance actually is pretty cool, sticks with the report. So now I see my actual versus forecast for North America versus Central America, etc. If I want to go back, I can just simply use my back button, and then it brings my columns back to what they were previously. So I've created this ad hoc report. I'm looking at this. I see a big variance in revenue. I can continue to drill into this variance. So I can, click down and see that this variance is in sales discounts, for example. And then if I want to further research this, I could use the design panel, but it's also very simple just to right-click here and say filter members and swap with product. And I could see what product is driving the variance in sales discounts. And then next, I can actually right-click and click on this specific product and filter down to the profit center level, so that I know this, there's a big variance. Perhaps this is some sort of rebate or return or something under the discounts category. I know what product it's associated to, and I drilled down to the profit center, and I now know, what actual profit center is driving this variance. So, a couple options. I can get on the phone and call this person. Within the system as well, you can have really detailed queries that can take you all the way down to the document level, and go, then you can go back into SAP and look up, what entry. So it just depends on how you want to interface with the system. So this is just a quick example of some of the ad hoc reporting capabilities within the system. Again, you can pre-publish these in the standard kind of templates that users can interface with, so that they're a little bit more formatted. So next, I want to go back to our process flow here. I'm going to show an example of some of the published reporting capabilities that are available within the system. So if I click on income statement, similarly, it's going to launch and open up a report. Okay, and in this report example, what we've done, so this report is built a little bit differently. The first report, very dynamic, very drag and drop, relatively highly formatted. But then also, if you want to create summary level reports, still with filters, but as opposed to the previous report actually utilized like style templates within Excel, an Excel functionality. Within this report, we simply created a high-level static report where you can actually do all the formatting just with normal formatting within Excel, right? So if you wanted to change, this to red or change anything within here, this is all, again, highly formattable. We've got custom filters up here, so we could filter on a specific month. In this report, we set up another filter, for a specific company code. So if we wanted to change that, again, once we change North America, the report refreshes automatically on the fly here. Also, in this formatted P&L, Very commonly, you might want to be looking at actuals versus forecast, actual versus budget, month to date, year to date, etc. What we can do is actually pull in this data so that it's pretty easy for you to kind of adjust these reports on the fly. So we can actually just take actuals, paste forecast into another, paste it into another column, and then just update this to forecast. Hit enter, and what you see is all of our data down here refreshed automatically. So this should just give people a flavor of some of the reporting capabilities within BPC Optimized. Again, you've got dynamic reporting capabilities, highly formatted. You've got finished, polished book reporting capabilities within Excel. But then there's also integration back to Microsoft PowerPoint. So if I open up PowerPoint here and click on File and Analysis and Open Presentation, I can click on my PowerPoint sample here. And just like in Microsoft Excel, Analysis for Office is integrated with the Office suite. So I opened up the chart, and within this whole workbook, I can set global prompts where you can pick specific months or period, a month, so that if you build the whole board book like this with all your different charts and visualizations, which you can add commentary to, you can filter on that specific month. So once I open up this PowerPoint, I can click on Refresh. Refreshes my data table here, which then in turn refreshes my chart as well. And then if you want to have individual filters on charts, you can come in here and actually change the filter. But the way that I see organizations utilize this most commonly within PowerPoint is, say, I actually, build out my 4, 5, or 10 slides for each one of my different segments or business units, and I'm just going to come in here and refresh it globally for the month and add my commentary into here. So this is nice functionality, again, for finance folks. Not only is BPC Optimized integrated with Excel, which can create very nice finished polished report, but also with PowerPoint. So what that means is, unlike with some other tools, you're not running a query, getting a data extract, mashing that up, putting it into Excel, doing some VLOOKUPs, trying to get it in the format that's ready to actually present. You're getting rid of all that offline work. And then in addition to that, with BPC Optimized leveraging S4, this data is actually real time, right? So if you want to get a quick view of your sales, before close is completed, you can come into this report, simply, again, refresh the data, pick your month, and you see that reflected within the system. So it can help, reduce the different iterations. A lot of times what's done today is, you're actually loading that data multiple times a day, and maybe there's downtime within the system for like an hour, right? And then you're rerunning different processes and things. So this, if you post an entry back into BPC, back into S4 and refresh this, you'll see the updated numbers right away. So there's no waiting for that batch time processing. All right, so hopefully that gives you a flavor of some of the finished polished reporting capabilities. The other thing I wanted to cover off is the commentary functionality that's available within BPC Optimized, as well as just an example of the planning capabilities. So under analysis here, I'm going to click on add commentary, and this is going to take me to a template that is by cost center with a comparison between actual versus plan. And what's kind of neat within BPC Optimized on top of HANA is that it actually handles disaggregation for you. So for example, this isn't probably the typical planning screen, but I'm looking at my actual versus my plan data by my cost centers. So this might be a selling cost center, marketing cost center, accounting cost center, right? These can show descriptions as well here. We've got an actual versus plan and a variance. And I would probably be planning this by cost center, selecting cost center as a filter in the top with the accounts across the rows and the months across. But I can also come in here and review, from an analytical perspective, my actual versus my plan data. And again, because there's this disaggregation functionality, if I wanted to make an adjustment to my cost center numbers, and let me just make sure this report is fully refreshed. So I can type in, you know, $500,000 here, save this data back to the system, and that actually disaggregates. So that'll take my adjustment from my original number, compare that, and allocate it down to the individual accounts. And then also just from a review perspective, if I'm looking at a variance in a specific account and wanted to add a comment into here, I saw, you know, when I opened this up, I had it in here, so I just deleted it. If I'm explaining a variance for an entire cost center, I could put in here, you know, expense accrual for bad debt. And this actually saves this comment back to the system, as well as saves the number that I submitted into the system back here as well. So then what's neat, you know, something that I had to do a lot in corporate finance, you know, we'd send out these templates, and by account, all of our cost centers would explain variances above a certain threshold, and then we'd have to go back and collect and aggregate that commentary and put it into a board book, right? So what's neat about this functionality is that, you know, if you have folks go in there by account, by individual cost centers and explain a variance after, you know, actuals have come in, then from a reporting perspective, you can also actually run report across your total company for like travel and expenses, for example. Have all your accounts, have all your cost centers show up for travel and expenses, and then see all the commentary that's been submitted. And then you can go back to your high-level variance report like we showed earlier and enter in your higher-level comments after you've collected this detailed information. So again, you know, these planning templates can be configured however you want. This is just a very simplistic example showing that the disaggregation functionality as well as the commentary capability. You can also, within BPC Optimized, build driver-based planning. So, you know, again, a simple example for a manufacturing company is if you wanted to plan volumes and pricing and costing information, you can have different templates where you submit that data, and BPC can, on the fly, automatically go back and calculate that for you. All right, so that was a quick 15-minute or so or 20-minute demo on some of the reporting capabilities, and just to show you, you know, example planning template and commentary. Again, that commentary saved in the system is available for everyone immediately, as well as those planning updates. So next, really want to focus on IT and finance super users to give you an idea of how you can actually build these templates, how you can deploy this to be scalable within the system here. So I'm going to go back to my web page, and I'm going to click on my administration tab, which I already have open. So you can see on the left-hand side, and just a disclaimer, so if you're on the finance side, you only care about your end state, you don't care about what all goes into it, feel free to drop off the webinar. But this will also, you know, give you some ideas of the capabilities. Excuse me, a bit of a cold. So on the left-hand side of the page, you have a tab for modeling, security, business rules. So if you have consolidation models like eliminations, as well as account transformations, for example, to help you manage with cash flows. Business process flows. So again, the process flow we showed earlier, we can create this in a nice GUI interface. Different features like work status, so you can leverage work status to help you lock out certain periods that have already been closed, journals, and then audit. So it's just starting with some of the dimensionality in here. Again, so you are actually sharing your master data with your source system, and you can add, you know, new products that you want to plan against. You could add new cost centers directly within here. So this does give you the capability to manage hierarchies. So as opposed to, you know, managing, you know, within an SAP, you can manage here. You can add new cost centers by just clicking Add, entering in the controlling area, entering in the cost center, and saving that back. So this is, again, very flexible. can be administered by a finance person. You can add, specific planning members, on the fly within this administration council. So next, I want to talk a little bit about the modeling that's available within BPC Optimized. So utilizing the standard objects in SAP, actually we have an example here for SG&A, which is looking at cost center expense and cost element detail. This also can sit directly on top of central accounting, central finance. But we can create this model. We actually just come in here and select to pick the info provider. Shows all of our different dimensions within here. Shows our aggregation levels that can be set up within SAP. And then to create this model as configurable and viewable within BPC, so that then we can actually leverage this to create queries. So this is just kind of quick first step to hook in the back end of what you need to create your query and generate your query within SAP. So once we've created that model, then we can go and create a local query. And here is where we really tailor that model and that end user interface to the specific groups that you're going to be working in. So it's something that I've seen kind of commonly done, historically with BEX reporting and sometimes with analysis for office reporting when you're not not leveraging BPC, is that IT kind of comes in and just plugs in the standard objects within BW and releases the reporting, and they make 50 characteristics available for reporting on the front end. Opposed to doing that, what I would suggest from a best practice perspective is that you really tailor the characteristics and the reporting that you want to see within BPC to your end user base. So, it's great that real time we can pull in any level of detail that we want from SAP, and we can drill back down the document and to any of these 50 characteristics. And what I would suggest is actually creating a query that has all those details for the very savvy super user who wants to use it. But for your regular month-over-month users who are running a handful of reports, which is the majority of your user base, really want to tailor the reporting specifically to them. So as opposed to adding 50 different characteristics, we could focus for cost center expenses, for example, on the 8 things that really matter. So similarly, conceptually, this data set is based off of CCA, data set. If this was based off of central finance, you have all fields available. But that doesn't mean you should be deploying reporting with a million fields in it again, right? So for a departmental manager, what do they care about? They care about their accounts, they care about their cost centers, they don't need to see all that other data. So you still deploy this modularly and with targeted queries to your end users with the concept of you've got real-time reporting that's still very, very simple, right? You only have a few selections to go in the system and pick from. So within this example query, what we've actually set up, and again, this can be configured by a finance person, it's pretty easy to use. We can come in here and just drag and drop between the characteristics available over here versus what we want to set up as free characteristics, what we want to default into the columns. So anything on the left here that's available within this data source, we can just drag over. So just again, kind of showing that functionality. Also, within cost element, for example, if we right-click, we can edit this, and we can name this whatever we want it to show as the front end. So, an example of this is within SAP, you may have a standard object name where it's called like business area, but the business actually calls it business unit, or they call it segment or something like that. So from a reporting perspective, you can rename that. You can set up the default within your query so that when users access it, they can look at a specific key in text so that it doesn't, default to just the key. Or if they're, so for cost element and for cost center, a lot of people actually know those numbers, so I would default this to key in text. Whereas for time, for example, this is actually fiscal year period. Just renamed it to say time on here. But for time, for example, maybe you just want this to display, text only as opposed to IDs, right? So that configuration can be changed within the individual reports, but this just helps set up kind of what that default view is. So when you go through design from a reporting perspective with your end users, again, you should kind of look at it as what are your target stakeholders within your company. So you may have your departmental expense folks, you've got your sales, marketing users, you've got your accounting users that are focused on expenses, accounting users that are focused on revenue, your controller level folks, your FP&A folks. So just like you would historically, within BPC Standard or within Hyperion or with some of these other tools, you'll still have targeted models to deploy, right? So again, this should just kind of give you an example of what this, what this query creation looks like. Once you are done picking your fields here, you can then save that. I'm just going to click back here. I've actually already, saved this query. And then next, we're going to access that query in just a second. I want to show you a couple of the other features in here, the info providers for non-SAP data source, as well as the security setup. But just from a process flow perspective, we've configured our model, we've created our query. Within that query, one other thing I didn't mention, you can also create filters. So if you wanted to filter on currency type, for example, we have that filter within that query. But then once we've set up the query, then we go back into the Excel interface, and we can create a default ad hoc workbook that you can use for the starting point of all your reports that's already highly formatted. So just real quick here on the info providers, you can leverage this to integrate with non-SAP data. So this could be, any data set. This could be data for subsidiaries that, aren't on SAP yet. This could be, headcount information, different statistical data information that might not be integrated with SAP. So you can, pull in from a flat file data source, for example. Let's see. So again, you can create a local info provider. You can actually upload that data source, create an ID in here. I'm not going to go through this, but just want to show the functionality that's available within here. So the way that this deployment kind of changes things going forward within S4, again, it kind of, as opposed to creating all these queries within Bex, things need to be controlled a little bit more from an IT perspective. This responsibility area can definitely be shared between groups. So last thing in the administration I wanted to show you is the security configuration. So for example, for data access profiles, you can set this up within BPC as well. So for our SG&A cube that we were just looking at, or our SG&A model and query, we can click on the SG&A demo, and I could create a new security profile for our sales users. I can click on Cost Center, and then I can actually use the hierarchies that are available within SAP. So I can click here, click Total, click on Sales Functions, hit OK, and use that to manage. So as opposed to setting up your roles, within SAP GUI, then it can all be managed just like in BPC Standard here within this administration council. All right, so next, going to jump back into Excel here. And I'm just going to open up a new worksheet. And we're going to connect to that data source to that query that we had just created. And again, before we publish this to our end users, we're going to edit that query, kind of set up the default selections within here, and then save this back out as a workbook that people can access. So I'm going to click on Insert Data Source. I've already, this is in my recent selections, so I can click on an SG&A demo query. Okay. And then on the left-hand side, I've got my design display panel. I can click on Cost Center, and I can just pull in my Cost Center hierarchy so that when users access this default template in the rows, they're already utilizing the hierarchy that we want to point them to. And security can be set up based off of hierarchy too, so if you have different user groups looking at different hierarchies, you can utilize security to lock that down, and you can also deploy different templates as a starting point for the reporting. So you simply just drag that back and forth. Within these templates as well, if you had 0 values, you can utilize this to do suppression. So if you're expanding by cost center account, you can suppress in the rows by default here. So once I've pulled my cost center, my cost element into here, I could also add filters into this report. So I could filter by specific members. I could add a filter for the time period, whatever we wanted to add to the top here, just like you saw in the other report. We can also edit the level of detail within hierarchies that we want people to see from a default perspective. So we're expanding by cost center, by cost element. Maybe we don't want this additional total in here, or maybe we don't want the cost center total within here. So whatever level of detail makes most sense. I can utilize my taskbar, hit Alt-8, and I can click on Show Levels, unselect that, and I see each one of my cost center groupings by my cost elements. We can also format this. So, for example, I can go to my Home tab here, and go to Cell Styles. And when we click on this, for all of our ad hoc reporting within BPC Optimized, analysis for Office utilizes these cell styles. So if for subtotals or for specific members or for number formats, you can get really, really specific with what you want to see in here. You can click on cell style, and SAP has pre-configured cell styles. So if I right-click on this cell style, I can click Modify, and if I want to see these specific subtotals, for example, bold, I just leverage the Excel functionality that's available within this, right? So click on Font, click on Bold. I could add borders into here. Whatever, you can get really, really specific just utilizing that Excel knowledge and functionality. So once I do that, that changes it. That formatting is now applied dynamically. So if I were to refresh my report, that sticks. We can do the same thing with the numbering. So if we wanted to scale this in millions, or if we wanted to scale this in thousands and save that out as our default, if we wanted, black and red formatting, we can do that as well. So once we're done and we've kind of set up our default template, again, this template is very dynamic, so users can come in here and they can drag and drop their different characteristics. They could put their months across the top. They could, look at their different versions, add variances. But this just provides, you can create one master ad hoc template or a couple master ad hoc templates that people use to interface with the system to make it a little bit easier, a little bit more user-friendly, right? So once I'm done with this, I can go and save this workbook using Analysis tab, and click on Save Workbook, and I can save this out to our centrally held folder where everyone can access it. So I've got my Analysis for Office folder with some of these different reports that we've been showing in here. In addition to that, if we have different style templates, so when you create these cell styles, and if you edit this and, you know, edit all different 20 of these pre-configured ones or create custom ones, you can save these style templates out, and users can import and apply these style templates to any reports that they want to leverage. So this ad hoc reporting, management reporting can be pretty highly formatted. You can add the formatting. You can actually even, just like we showed the variants earlier, add, spacing into this report by default. So that should give you a feel from a deployment perspective, again, within BPC Optimized, just because you have all the data in one central place. From a reporting perspective, you want to make this really easy. You want to give the users as few amount of places as possible to go to start building their reports. You want to make their selections minimal, so they're not looking through 50 things, right? Imagine being an accounting or financial analyst coming from working with a different general ledger system, coming to work with SAP. If you've got 50 things working in here, you don't quite know what you want. So again, you would probably create, a separate detailed query with all those different characteristics and fields for your real super users. But this is really tailored to your individual users there. So, excuse me. Lastly, I think one other thing I'd just like to show really quickly here, when I showed the polished report, so you can create the reporting within here, pretty highly formatted. You can also create, simple high-level static reports that then you can, add rows, add columns to, and adjust, like I showed you earlier. And you can do that very simply if you've used, BPC Standard before, if you've used Hyperion before, and leverage like EPM reach-read formulas. Analysis for Office has very similar functionality to that. It's called SAP Get Data. So we can convert this report to formula-based report, and then we can actually set up keys in the columns and the rows and reference those keys so that as we make those updates, this report updates on the fly. All right, well, with that, we concluded everything we wanted to show within this quick demonstration. At this point, we want to go ahead and open it up to questions.
And this is John Collins again. We're showing our contact information on the screen for both John Essig, our presenter, and John Collins, myself, Director of Sales. So if there are any questions that you have in the future regarding BPC Optimized or any of the performance management suite of products at SAP, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be very responsive in getting back to you and answer your questions, whether you're a potential customer, current user, or anyone else in the industry as well. So thank you all for your time today. Watch for additional webinars from Simplify coming up within the next month. We'll have a rolling schedule that will be continuing to broadcast to continue your education in SAP's performance management suite of products. So thanks again for everybody for attending today. And we'll be in touch, and feel free to reach out to us if you do have any questions.
Thanks, John. I think there were just a couple questions that were logged in here, but I think at the end of the webinar we actually answered those, so we should be all set. So like John said, feel free to reach out to us if anything else comes up. Thank you very much.